Why are brands still scared of gamers in 2023? So we've got about 45 minutes or so. We're not going to need to race through this. We've got a little bit of time to interact, but there are opportunities to jump in throughout this. We want to keep it as interactive as we can. It's deliberately an intimate room, so it's not a big speaker stage so that we're just going to be broadcasting at you. We want you guys to get involved in some of this, and there'll be opportunities to do that throughout. But in terms of what we're going to cover, very, very kind of top-line overview about Kairos for those of you who don't know who we are. A little bit of the challenges that brands are facing in gaming, particularly ones that we see a lot come across our desk. Our friends at Heinz here, Hannah in particular, are going to talk us through some of the challenges that they've faced and how they've engaged with that. And then finally, a couple of tips and tricks that we think you guys will be able to take away offline. So who's in the room today from our side? We have Hannah Winterbourne from Heinz, who we've been working with for best part of a year or so now on various different gaming campaigns. We've got Mark Bellamy, Strategy Director at Kairos, myself, Managing Partner at Kairos, and we also have Mike and Chris, who are sat in the room as well, some of the co-founders here who'll be able to mingle with some of you afterwards and answer any questions you might have about some of the work that we do. So I will fly through these slides, but these are just in here really to cover off a bit about us and what we do. So we position ourselves these days as the social agency for brands and creators. We work with both big Fortune 500 brands and high-profile creators in equal measure. And we've been doing that for about 8 years now. So have hopefully a decent amount of experience to be able to talk to some of the subjects today. We were born from the creator economy, so we have a lot of experience being an influencer agency, but I suppose a lot of the heritage that we have is in the gaming space. So some of the work that we're most well known for is within the gaming sector, and that's why we feel that we want to be able to speak to you guys about that today. We are a team split across the world, particularly New York, London and Manchester are our headquarters. Something that's, I suppose, an interesting kind of piece of trivia about us is that we are about 54% Gen Z, so we have a very, very young workforce, which I suppose does allow us to speak to a lot of this gaming audience and other particular audiences in that space. And we've worked with a lot of brands over that time as well, so particularly in the gaming space, but more widely, and you'll notice a few up here from a variety of different verticals and sectors. Again, whether it be endemic or non-endemic, we can talk to a few of those today. But that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over now to both Hannah and Mark, who are going to take you through a little bit of, I suppose, a workshop, if you like, about some of the challenges that we are seeing in the space right now.
Grab the clicker. Thank you. Cool, so why are we here, right? So we posed the question of why are brands still scared of gamers today? We've been provocative on purpose to that extent. I think we saw this stat come out earlier this year. There's no one stat to rule them all, right? Like every statistic tells a slightly different story. But from an investment from a media perspective in gaming as a channel, it's got slower growth than social media, slower growth than connected TV on a year-over-year basis. Which, look, in itself doesn't tell a full story, but it's weird, right? Because 2021, take yourselves back a couple of years, everybody in this room, whether your agency side or brand side, was probably getting a brief from a brand manager, from a CMO saying, give me a gaming strategy, right? We were in the middle of COVID and every brand wanted to find a gaming strategy, find their way in. You had headlines from the biggest advertisers in the world, Unilever, P&G, Ford, saying that gaming was the crux of their strategy moving forwards. But we haven't seen brands putting their money where their mouth is from a media perspective. And we just wanted to really unpick that a little bit from one of the reasons, or one of the kind of the core reasons why we think we see that, and also talking from some experiences from Hannah and Heinz as some ways to try and mitigate that a little bit. And I think trying to demystify the category a little bit, because actually, even though it feels like gaming has been being talked about for not just since COVID, right? So for a lot longer than that as a mainstream category, it's bigger than music and TV and film combined from a revenue perspective. Like we're looking at 285 billion plus in the last Newsy report. This isn't something that actually is translating through to marketing budgets. So we just want to unpick why we kind of think that that's happening, really. So I love a Gartner hype cycle. You'll see it in pretty much every deck I do. But I think it's a nice way of thinking where we are from a gaming perspective at the moment. So if you haven't come across it before, where the expectations are versus where we are in something's maturity. You see this for different pieces of tech, but also different categories. Your peak of inflated expectations is when something is on the tip of everybody's tongue, realizing nobody knows what to actually do with it, with your trough of disillusionment, and then actually when brands and individuals start to understand how to be productive at the back of that. So it's a bit of a crude way of looking at gaming, to be honest with you, but it's interesting as kind of a conversation starter. Out of interest, anyone in the room, look, we're a relatively intimate group, so feel free to speak up. Where do you think gaming is from currently? Like, where would you kind of map it there from where some of the work that you've seen out there, some from an investment perspective? Any guesses? Anybody like to think where there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just genuinely really interested in anyone else's opinion on where you think it kind of is as a channel.
Coming just down the trough, I think, at the moment. There's, similar to many things, given mobile web, there's been a lot of the initial, great, tell me about it, what can we do, but just in terms of some of the initial tests where you've got the scale that you thought you might be able to, or really find it eventually it's a given brand that you work on. And then kind of coming out of that again now, just again due to COVID and whether that should come. So hopefully it's coming out of the trough for me, but it's almost kind of different.
Yeah. Any more for any more?
I would kind of agree, but maybe just like the beginning of coming out of it, because previously in the next door session with EE, that campaign sounded really kind of like it knew its audience. It was not doing stuff just to be there. So just seeing campaigns like that kind of come into life, I'm hoping that we are sort of learning a bit. But the title of this session, I think it's still heavily applies to older generations. Let's say generally. I don't want to. It is a generalization. Of course, people are trying to keep up and learn, but I think the more the workforce becomes Gen Z, even we still Gen Y. I'm Gen Y, so younger Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. I think it will become more and more acceptable. I think, but there's a lot we can do probably to educate older generations around that.
Yeah, I think good level of optimism and realism, I think, around kind of where we're at. We wanted to kind of, I guess, put it back onto you again a little bit, and it can even just be a raise of hands to an extent, but I think you're right. I think we are in kind of, or there's an assumption over the last couple of years we've kind of hit into that trough. We'll talk a little bit through where we kind of think we are later on in this presentation, but I mean, I'm not sure if you can hopefully see all these, but I imagine some of these quotes have kind of come across when you try to either pitch gaming to a client, pitch gaming internally to a key stakeholder. Where does my brand fit in? There's a fear of getting it wrong. I think we've all seen a lot of stories of brands getting burnt, and that just puts people off. It puts businesses off. There's a high level of risk. There's a perceived level of risk in investing in gaming as a channel. And I think, particularly around we don't want to be associated with unhealthy images, right? Whether that's staying up all night, gaming, not being outside, exercising, whether that is the sheer violence attached to gaming. These are all easy reasons to say no, I think, which is interesting. Anything particularly resonate with anybody in the room? Anything new you want to add to that you've kind of had as pushback and try to sell this in, or even just something that's come across your desk as an agency of reasons not to invest in gaming?
And there's also like a bit of a financial conversation too from an agent point of view. So I talked to someone yesterday, they were actually pushing me saying, but where would you take the money from to fund gaming?
Yeah.
Then you have to come in at a certain point to actually make it worthwhile. It's not from a 5k CBC buy-in, there's a certain cost of entry which needs to be covered. So I think when budgets are kind of tight, where you actually taking from some TVs, the social stuff, so that's also, from my side of things, consideration.
Yeah, definitely, and there's a much more robust measurement model in other categories, right? So you can actually, like you say, you can dip your toe in the water with, say, there's a new music genre that's popping this year, for example, on TikTok. There's something quite easy for you to get involved with that, right? You can go in through maybe one creator, dip your toe in the water because you feel comfortable with that, and a lot more people in the business feel comfortable with that. I think there's a mystery around gaming that people don't feel necessarily comfortable with it because it feels like it's kind of this closed environment. So we kind of think that one of the big reasons that stops brands investing in gaming is this kind of two-dimensional categorization of gamers themselves, because ultimately, talking about gaming as a category is quite unhelpful because gaming is like talking about sport. It's not like talking about tennis or golf. It's like sport in itself. It's got 500 different sports within it. So you need to think of it at that level. And we tend to think, I imagine all the briefs that come across anybody's desk or the briefs that you write is going, okay, we're targeting casual, mid-core, hardcore gamers. So it's categorized by how much you play, or it's categorized by what game you play. So playing Fortnite, playing Diablo, playing Call of Duty, EAFC, whatever, and you're categorized by that game. The reason we've got the Always Sunny gift there is that how do you see that? How do you see the bridge for your brand? So if I'm a Samsung, one of our clients, and I've got a monitor that is designed for a hardcore gamer versus a more casual gamer, great, I can see a way to kind of connect my product in there. If you're a Nike coming to this, but actually don't have a product directly for gamers, where do I see the way in? And actually, it's a bit of a kind of, it becomes a bit obtuse there for brands to understand where the opportunity is necessarily. And it's something that you can end up with kind of two different routes here. So again, we don't want to bash any brands here because I think we want to kind of be optimistic about the opportunities, but you kind of are asking where your brand plays that authentic role. So apologies if anybody in the room has worked on this, but you're kind of forcing it or finding it, right? So Aldi is a good example of forcing that authentic link in gaming. So the Tea Time Takeover, again, it sounds great on a brief, but actually when it comes to reality, the idea of the campaign was for parents to get their kids to stop gaming and come down and eat tea. That's where Aldi plays their authentic role, right? Eating at tea time. Telling gamers to stop gaming, do not do it. don't tell people to stop doing the thing that they enjoy doing most. It's got a massive level of backlash. Aldi pulled it. Again, you can see when it's sitting around a table in a conference room when it's a good idea, right? But actually, if you go out and kind of test that with the audience, you'd see that response. Versus a DHL. DHL have no gaming products. They have no right to necessarily be in there like an endemic brand or how we talk about that. But what DHL did, this is quite an old campaign now, this is about 4 or 5 years old, what they did with ESL, so a partnership with ESL, so Esports Sports League, around Dota 2, a game. And they identified there with the FE bots. The FE bot is the bot that goes around the DHL logistics centers delivering things, and effectively they drive efficiently. It's kind of their automated product. But what DHL is known for at brand level is when you're under pressure and something needs to be delivered, you can rely on DHL, because that's what you think about, right? You can just rely on them to deliver. So what they looked at is they did a partnership with Dota around a video and a piece of film. It was an IP partnership, essentially. They're a little bit cheaper in 2018 than they are now. And it was around the FE bot delivering salves. So salves are heals, basically. They're bonuses, they're health that you can deliver in game. And it showed the FE bot navigating through this storyline that had loads of like specific in-jokes for Dota fans. And the FE bot was then delivering the salve to the player. Lovely bit of branded content. They also then started to activate that at events that they had sponsored, where you could start to unlock the QR code and you would then be delivered digital codes that you could unlock in game. To the point where, and this is kind of unheard of for a brand sponsorship, where you had 1,000 fans at an ESL event in Birmingham chanting DHL, DHL. Like, I mean, you can't buy that level of credibility. But it's because they went about it from a way of understanding what does our brand really stand for, what's the value proposition where we can play within that. And I think that's kind of the lesson we want to take away from it today. Lots of people will tell you that alignment is great. How do you find authenticity? Awesome, but what is that for my brand? So this is why I invited Hannah here today, because I think the way that Heinz have gone about that from a brand that doesn't have an automatic role in gaming, right? You don't think of gaming when you think Heinz straight away. We've got some great case studies to understand a few very practical lessons about how they found that role and then actually started to sell that in internally, which is a really important bit for everybody kind of here. So I'll hand that to you.
Great, thank you. Perfect. I think talking about that authentic way in is the perfect bridge to talk about Heinz's journey into gaming over the last couple of years. As Mark said, we've got 3 case studies that I'd love to share with you today. But instead of, talk about the creative, the amazing results and everything that you can probably already see and have maybe seen online, we want to kind of lift the curtain back a bit and bring the reality, I guess, from a business standpoint of what this brief was, how we managed to sell that internally, and most importantly, what the learnings that we've had that have really taken us on this journey and still motivate us today to continue to explore this place. So I don't know if anyone knows Heinz Hidden Spots. May have heard of it, may have seen of it. Yes, no, bit mixed. This was the campaign, I think, for us that really got us exciting about the possibilities for our brand in the gaming space. There wasn't a brief for this idea. It was a proactive idea from one of our amazing partners in Brazil that when we saw the insight and the setup and the way they presented it to us, it was so authentic and gave us a clear right to play that it was an absolute no-brainer that we were going to jump into this one. So let's have a quick look at the case, and then we can talk around the learnings and how we sold this one in.
These were games back then. Slow, simple, chill. And if needed, we just hit the pause button. These are games now. Fast-paced, complex, professional. And no pause button. When do these people even eat? They don't. Because if you bite, you die. Bite, die. Bite, die. See? So Heinz teamed up with Call of Duty, the #1 game in the world, to figure out the best spots to snack safely on their brand new map, and leaked it to top influencers from around the world. Using burger wraps. This is Heinz Hidden Spots.
Now this is hidden.
I'm going to kick back and dig into my burger.
Perfect spot. We got the nice view. We can eat our burger in peace. No one will find us here. Who would think to find us over here?
And they must keep walking like your holiday.
If it was a kid, si je n'avais pas eu mon ketchup Heinz.
Heinz ketchup has given us energy.
Hidden spot, eat a chip.
In only a few hours, the gaming community got hungry for more, and hundreds of spots were mapped out organically, not only in Call of Duty's new map, but also in other blockbuster games.
The most secret spot on the map, you can actually enter these ones.
Espérate, tengo que mover mi hamburguesa en el Kairos Group. ¡Ah! ¡Teníamos!
Fast to high, soldier.
Alert terminated.
Mission accomplished, soldier.
Heinz Hidden Spots. Eat burgers, not bullets.
Let me eat my burger in peace!
So this wasn't the first gaming idea that's ever been presented to us back in 2021, I think it was. We'd seen many ideas, but this was the first one, I think, that made so much sense. It was the right insight that gave us the right to play in a truly authentic way. So we jumped into this, and we started with just 3 markets, which I think is a really interesting learning that we discovered after this. So it was born in Brazil. We launched in 3 markets initially, and that, I think, in itself also helped the business get a bit more comfortable with stepping into this space. Because I'll be honest, it still was, exactly as Mark said, a really kind of fear of the unknown, guarded territory that no one, I think, was willing to say, yeah, let's do it at instant first glance. So we launched in those first 3 markets, and we stayed really close to how the sentiment was, how it was starting to pick up, and we saw quite quickly that momentum was building. So from that point, I think we as a business as well were so agile enough to say, look, you know what, we're going to go all in. And we scaled it to 10 markets in less than 2 weeks off the back of that initial success that we saw in just a small kind of test zone, as we like to call it. So that in itself, I think, helped us sell this in because it was a space we were a bit nervous about. We had proven results in a couple of markets that when you're going to a country and asking them to make space within their calendar at, the drop of a hat, invest some budget, shift exactly as you said at speed, this really helped us, I think, in our first big play into the gaming space. The other thing that I think was really interesting about this is it was a simple idea. So again, I'm sure many of you can relate, but when you're trying to sell that into the business, whether it's someone in legal, marketing, finance, whoever, the fact that they got it and they weren't necessarily a gamer was a massive plus. And I think when you're on that early stage of your journey, it really helped us again, I think, people to tap into that gut instinct that there was something good here and we should go for it. And the last thing that was interesting about this one is the fact that we took that kind of staggered approach, as I said. We were cautious in the way that we launched, we scaled, but we didn't take it too far, which may sound strange, but as I'm sure you can imagine, when you've had a successful campaign, we had some incredible results from this. Quite quickly, the questions come on, what's your gaming strategy? Are you launching a gaming platform? What are you doing? What are we doing next? Let's run, let's move. But instead, we took a breather and said, you know what, the right thing for us at this point is to stop, learn, and understand. So the next case is exactly what we did. So instead of run with more creative and continue to scale that, we came to the guys at Kairos and said, look, we need your help in understanding the gamer better, what their motivations are, and actually what they want from brands in this space. And what we worked up together is this Heinz Heroes program, which was a grassroots creator ambassador program that we ran over a couple of months. It was just 3 creators in one market, so in this case, the UK, which allowed us to really learn and understand in a safe environment. So we didn't have the pressure of a big campaign, huge investment. The investment for this was really minimal. And the number one objective for us was actually to learn, which might sound strange when you're working with creators and you probably can relate, you know, it's all around quantitative numbers, impressions reach, etc. But actually the KPIs for this were learn, understand, gain insight, desirability, and engagement, which was quite unique, I think, for the business at the time. And this program, I think, was game-changing for us in the sense of just pure understanding of this space amongst the business, even down to just the terminology in the chat. Believe it or not, like, again, 2 years ago, and still today, people don't understand it. It's like a foreign language for some people. Honestly, it's insane. So I think just being able to use this program internally as a knowledge bank, really, for people to watch, understand, listen, and get comfortable with this space and grow our confidence was really key for us at this point in our journey. Then off the back of all of this, as I said, our confidence grew. We come to our most recent example, which I think this last campaign I'm going to show you is really reflective of how we've evolved and the journey we've been on as a business in actually viewing gaming as a media channel. So as I said, we've had and continue to get the questions around, should we invest in a gaming platform? And for us, it's less about that because we know it requires high investment, as you said, a consistent focus, recency, you know, a full commitment to do so. And that doesn't necessarily feel right for us as a brand. So instead, we try to view gaming just like we would any other media channel and understand what's the priority from an audience perspective, who do we want to speak to, and just view this as a place exactly as you would like socials, etc., where they are. So how can we speak to them when it feels authentic and right in a more natural way? So let's have a look at the last one and then we'll talk around the buy-in. Cool. So the brief behind this, if it wasn't so clear from what you saw, is we as a brand have a vested interest in protecting the world's soil. We're a food company. We know the soil and the food system is at risk if we don't act and protect the soil to ensure people can enjoy good food for the generations to come. So what we wanted to do is educate consumers on this issue that we're facing in the food system, and in particular, speak to a younger audience that we know are more environmentally conscious and communicate our message in a way that's engaging and typically Heinz. So it wasn't a gaming brief. It was a business challenge, similar to as we would brief any other creative on any other channel. And what the idea was that probably wasn't so obvious here is we actually hacked in Fortnite the progressively shrinking safe zone. So we know that a safe zone exists, and what was interesting about this idea is that we actually sped that up to bring to life the challenge of the rapidly deteriorating soil in a way that was relevant for them in an environment that they know in Fortnite. So what made us buy into this idea was the fact that it was an authentic hack of the game. So we were playing with a feature that already exists in the game, so it automatically gave us reason for us to show up and be there. But more so, what we were doing by playing with the game and speeding up that safe zone shrinking was making a more exciting and more challenging experience for the player. So you can see on our journey, this is 2 years on, we understand the motivations of the players more. We understand this audience and what they want, and we converted that into a creative that, as you said earlier, Mark, you say don't interrupt the gameplay, but we actually did here, and we were confident to do so because we felt like we were bringing an added experience to the player. So I think it speaks to the journey that we've been on and why that learning phase was so important for us to make sure that anything we did beyond that was super sharp and super spot on to what this audience is looking for. And the last reason I think this one was an easier sell to the business is the fact that although it looks like a full Fortnite partnership, this was all created in Fortnite creative mode. So it didn't require, the months, if not years, of negotiations, the legalities, the cost. It was something that we could turn around from idea to launch in, a couple of months, if that. So that, again, was appealing, I think, for senior stakeholders to say, you know what, this is right, we should back it, and it isn't such a high investment for the business.
I think just to kind of add on to that, so we made the point earlier, right, saying that one of the reasons that people are scared around gaming is the overall investment you've got to do. You got two really good examples there of how to not get around that, but actually start to work your way up to the IP partnership, which the way into gaming in 2018 was to go through the publisher, because publishers wanted brands to come to them. Still want brands to come to them, but it's got a 7-figure price tag attached to it a lot of the time. So that's where influencers and creators are a way in, but not always with your kind of hero level names that are still costing you that level of money. What you did with Heinz Heroes, to your point, which is super interesting, is going, okay, we're going to go micro level and we're going to understand what resonates from a brand perspective. Even down to the tactical level of customizing bottles with labels was something that you said to us we can do really easily, actually. Can't come out with unique flavors, that's going to take 8 months. We can't start to talk about and completely change our product in any way, but we can get you some customized labels. That resonated better than anything else we could have developed from a creator, like offering them rewards, giving them cash incentives, giving you a personalized bottle of ketchup that you can put on your stream. Absolutely, we got so much organic content from those creators that you weren't paying for. That insight there is going, okay, something that's very low cost to us is very high value to the influencer, and it's probably going to be therefore high value to their community as well. You've got a really strong insight to then base a lot of that marketing on going forwards. So I think using micro-influencers not just as an awareness driver, but also as an insight effectively is a really interesting part of that. And the other side is going, what would probably be feared from I think when we talk guerrilla, lots of CMOs can get really scared, right? Because you think, okay, what are we actually... Guerrilla is something that works very rarely. It's a bit of a 1 in 10 shot with guerrilla marketing. But actually when you're not doing an IP partnership, we probably wouldn't call that guerrilla. It's actually just working, to your point, there's a lot of modes with, Fortnite's a great one with the creator mode. We work with Gillette at the moment where we've developed a map with them that's got no partnership with Fortnite at all attached to that. You can create a really customized brand experience without a partnership. It's getting more difficult. The publishers will always kind of want their pound of flesh a lot of the time, but as long as you're pushing people and giving value to the players in game, there's a lot of kind of freedom there that I think is a little bit unknown. Can I grab the...
Yeah, of course.
So I think the kind of one lesson we want to go back to, if you look back at that two-dimensional categorization we talked about, so how much you play, what game you play, you've looked at 3 different game titles there, right? So 3 different publishers that Heinz have worked with. The target was not a casual gamer, a mid-core gamer, a hardcore gamer. It was, we know what we can offer in a few different ways. We know the message we want to communicate. Where does that exist? Where are those gamers that's going to resonate with? So, hopefully, this will go. Hoping it'll go to the next one. Yeah, there we go, cool. So, we wanted to talk about kind of the reason why you play, not just when you play or what you play. So what we talked about before was how often you play and what you play, but actually the reason and the motivations behind why gamers play is how we start to kind of categorize who you should be talking to. You'll see a lot of people talking around LinkedIn at the moment saying we need to ban the word gamers. Very supportive of that. It's a completely vacuous term. It doesn't really help when you're starting to look at it. It's like talking about sports people. So I think we need to understand why do you play. So your kind of, our matrix here is committed and casual. So how not about hours, but actually how committed you are to playing, whether you do it alone or whether you do it with others. And you've kind of got before, this is quite a kind of high level way of looking, okay, why does somebody game? So your top left is you're very committed, but you do it alone. This is your achievement-based game. This is someone who's going and playing Zelda maybe 8 to 15 hours a week and needs to complete that game. It's almost a challenge against themselves to understand how they get to that next level, beat that boss and finish it. But it can be quite a solo, it's something that it's all for like that personal level of achievement for them. Versus your flip on the right-hand side is competitive. That is about being somebody else. That is not against the computer. That is about playing within a team potentially, but that is where your kind of esports life, almost when you're doing it as a livelihood. The bottom two in the more casual end of the spectrum, if I carry on going clockwise, connection, this is your social gamer. This is going to play EFC Saturday night with my friends. This is how I connect and actually maybe meet people through as well. This is my pub to an extent, if you're kind of looking at it from a non-gaming perspective. And then the enrichment side of things is when you're playing for fun, right? This is where, me personally, I sit very much bottom left. So this is where I'm picking up a Nintendo Switch on my commute because I need to decompress on the way home. I'm doing it on a Saturday morning because maybe I'm trying to get out of the thing that I'm supposed to be doing and try to just game instead, right? So it's that kind of getting away, that escapism level, that way, that almost mindfulness level to gaming. The reason we bring this up is because now if you look at this as a brand, I would hope you'd start to see a few more authentic ways in. So if I look at Fortnite and I'm a brand like Heinz, where's my authentic way in there necessarily? What am I actually, where do beans or where does ketchup play a role in Fortnite? Not necessarily, it's not obvious. But actually you look at it from a enrichment perspective, I want to play for fun. And actually I want to have, and I want to create this almost bit of social capital that I can talk to other gamers around. That's what kind of hidden spots lent into, was that fun element of it. Or even you could say from a connection perspective, they looked at it to understand how can I create and almost be talking to other gamers about finding these hidden spots in the game. I would look at this, I'll use the Nike example again. Nike don't see, okay, should I be talking to a hardcore or a casual gamer? But achievement is the crux of Just Do It, right? It's the crux of my brand creative platform. I can start to see achievement-based gamers. There's something that aligns up with what I stand for as a brand. And there's something for us to hold on to there and start looking at. And it's a basis of kind of developing that brief. So, key takeaways. For today, kind of this is a bit of a 1, 2, 3 step process, but wanted to kind of talk through a bit of a summary of the things that we've kind of touched on across both Hannah's case studies and some of what we're sort of pushing today. But the first one being, I have sorry, the line's slightly gone to the right there, which doesn't really help. I have a personal kind of issue with the word endemic. I think in calling a brand endemic in gaming has kind of become useless now because actually understanding what an endemic brand is, it's created a bit of a barrier for brands saying, okay, I haven't got a product that is relevant to, that is a gaming product. I haven't got a chair that I'm creating, a mouse, or actually a monitor. So actually I need to treat it with real caution. Completely, like, you shouldn't be thinking of it that way. Think about relevance, right? So actually, don't be put off by that label, or endemic or non-endemic. Think, am I relevant or not relevant? How can we drive relevance to the experience of gaming? And the experience of gaming, to that point, has food and drink involved in it. It has music involved in it. It has the same with a music or a film. It's not just about the act of actually watching it itself. It's everything that happens either side of it. So find a correlation between the reason why a consumer would engage with your brand and why somebody would game. If you can find that relationship between them, you've got a really, really strong start, and it will be there for most of the time. It's very rare that it's not. Once you found it, identify it and actually understand where that message aligns. So I think that was the really interesting bit from the SOS Tomatoes case study that Hannah took you through there, is they had a message from a environmental perspective that they knew would resonate with a younger audience, and actually looking at a creative-based game like Fortnite, where actually you can start to have fun with the maps, there's a really obvious way where we can actually start to push that message, not just from a feeling like we're just doing a PR headline, but actually there's an opportunity to kind of authentically communicate that in a way that we can very clearly show what we're doing in the real world in-game as well. So don't just look for that authentic connection, understand where you can then push an existing message from your brand. Trying to come up with a new message specifically for gamers, possible, but I just wouldn't start there. Start with what you're already telling the rest of your consumers, because when we start to think of gamers and your current customers as different people is when you get into a bit of a difficult territory. Like, your current customers are gamers. You've got 97% of Gen Z are saying that they're gaming on a daily basis. Like that was what the recent study from Newsy said. Like, we're talking everybody here. Second takeaway is a framework that we call Stay and Play. So I think one of the reasons we had on earlier around why brands don't tend to look at gaming is because it's very easy to say, we don't have a Twitch channel, we don't have a YouTube channel, are we going to have to start one? You'll get a quote back from an agency saying that it's 6 figures a year to run a Twitch channel, to do it properly, which it can be sometimes. But that it doesn't necessarily mean you can't start to play in other channels like X, in TikTok. There's a huge amount of gaming conversation and community and interaction that's happening on these platforms. So what we would say from a stay and play perspective is, okay, if you're going to start to do something within Call of Duty, for example, yes, work with Call of Duty streamers on Twitch, work with them on YouTube. That's your stay, that's your crux, your kind of foundations of how you start to drive awareness around that partnership or around the activity that you're doing within that game. But also feel free to start doing some of that play activity to actually start looking at a more casual gamer audience that's much wider and talking around a topic in gaming at the moment. NPCs, for example, so non-playing characters, are a trending conversation around in the gaming space at the moment, and kind of mocking them on Twitter and TikTok. Go and engage with that and be part of it. We work with a lot of brands that have no presence on Twitch, no presence on YouTube, but actually we work with them on specifically their X and their TikTok channels in gaming. Kit Kat, Pizza Hut, KFC, we've all worked with them in that front because they know that's where they've got a much wider breadth and they can start to engage with a wider set of gamers and not be necessarily pinned to a specific IP. So really don't be kind of put off by the channel strategy. You can just play within one environment. And the final takeaway I want to talk about, which I think is probably most important, most relevant to what Hannah's been talking through, is do not be afraid of being tactical. Being tactical is a strength in the gaming space. So I think not kind of being put off by that, okay, go hard or go home mentality. That's really not a kind of useful way to look at it. Feel free to test and learn and actually work with, to that point, working with some smaller creators, identify what's resonating, what's not, what they actually already think of your brand, where there is a community existing that's already talking about it, and understand where that you can actually drive benefits long term. Final point, and this is where we are at a media event, so it's important to talk about this. When you have found that opportunity, ride the wave. Look at Heinz, put your paid media budget where your mouth is and actually start to drive that, because I think we all know that growing social channels purely from an organic perspective was doable in 2020. It's not doable now. We need to look at kind of earned from a creator perspective and an influencer perspective, organic, the content that we're writing and creating ourselves from a video perspective, and paid alongside that from a tactical point of view. They need to work kind of symbiotically. So I think understanding when you have found that opportunity for something that's working, resonating, make sure that your influencer and your paid budget is supporting that at the same time and you capitalize on it, because they can be sort of diamonds to be found. Anything from those three that really kind of stuck out? Anything you want to ask questions around? We've kind of flown through that because we wanted to make sure that we got to this point, but completely open forum, whether it's for Hannah and myself. We've got a couple more slides after this, but really wanted to retain a few minutes at the end to have some questions. It can be about the slides, it can be much more widely, much more wide around the gaming space. Feel free. Go on, Chris. Yeah.
Gaming versus esports and how Heinz navigated that, because the amount of people internally who just go, I want esports, and people don't quite understand the differentiation or even the difference there at all between the two. I mean, the amount of conversations I have with brand managers who are like, yeah, I just want an esports strategy, but what they actually mean is a gaming strategy, or they want a gaming strategy, but what they mean is an esports strategy. So how Heinz navigated that, / also how I guess the direction would be given there around those crossover. Yeah,
no, definitely. I'll be honest, I think you've seen we're still on a learning journey, and I think within the business there was less a conversation of gaming versus esports. It was just purely understanding both, and I think we're still in a space that we're considering gaming as everything. But given the nature of our business, given the nature of our products, I think the focus for us is more in the gaming space more than the esports. But who's to say, like you said, in the journey that we're on, that won't be the next phase that we're interested in. But I think for us, given our brand proposition and our products, gaming is definitely the focus. And there isn't such that established understanding of both that it's becoming a tension point or debate for us at this moment. I think
look, anyone who's in here is really familiar with the gaming space as well will kind of know that the esports landscape is really, it's volatile at the moment. It's where it was a couple of years ago, where teams were very stable investments and sponsorship dollars were kind of really increasing within the esports environment. At the moment, teams are going bust quite regularly. They're starting to kind of move back from that boom that was there. That does not mean that the industry is going away by any means. It's still growing really fast. But if we go back to that hype cycle, esports definitely has kind of gone from those inflated expectations to kind of dropping quite hard. And I think that is that kind of professional side of gaming. If we go back to that quadrant, it's just that top right-hand side. It's the competitive element of gaming. And it's, think of it, and I kind of always bring it back to a sports context. It's probably the easiest kind of like for like. There's a wide way you can start to engage with football fans or tennis fans outside of Wimbledon or the Premier League. And I think it's, normally the entry point is a lot more expensive as well. And I think just to kind of call it from a cold perspective there, it's, it should, when we tend to look at gaming strategies more widely for brands, esports is one element of that, and looking at amplification points throughout the year. So the most competitive side of gaming is probably, from an eyeballs point of view, is much smaller than actually doing something that's in-game for a slightly more casual player. About 2/3 of the gaming audience you're looking at would consider themselves casual gamers, and they're not watching esports tournaments necessarily. So I think it's understanding where you find an opportunity for your brand to play a role. The DHL one's a really good example, right? Like, they did actually look at esports as kind of their way in, because they wanted to look at kind of high performance, and that's where their brand could play a role. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to with your brand, for sure. So it's definitely difficult, and we deal with it really, really frequently. Any more questions? Cool. Yeah.
Just touched on evaluation before.
Yeah.
Just interested to see in terms of how these were genuinely looked at in most simplest terms. Are we looking at something which will break through in the owned space to say this is really where we've actually got the most value from it, or are you looking, again, difficult for me to say, would you expect gaming to really drive in a reach frequency the same way other broadcast channels would do? But I mean, from simplest terms, what would you say is really where you first want to see gaming drive value for you?
Yeah, I think at this point for us, it's more around speaking to the right consumer, is it exactly as you said. And depending on that brief or the objective, it really does differ. Us as a business, I think there is a huge focus on driving earned and talkability over, say, your traditional metrics, just because we face the same challenge as every other business of tight budgets, right? So for us, the tactic is always focused more on what's our job to be done, what's the creative way in, and how can we drive that impact and talkability, I would say, ahead of the more traditional reach frequency metrics that you mentioned, that other channels play a role for us, I think, a bit more stronger at this point in time. So yeah, for us, the focus is definitely more, I would say, on the owned and earned today. But again, who's to say how that would evolve in the future?
I think what will be really interesting to see what the publishers do from a data product perspective. So currently, the Riots and Blizzards of this world aren't providing that much of a transparent data perspective to understand when you are working with, or you're developing something in game, to understand who's interacting with it. A lot of the reporting we're doing is based on influencer activity or social activity on channels that we can own and actually start to look at. What will be interesting is when the big publishers start to actually probably provide that as a product you can buy, and start to look at themselves as a media channel, which currently they're not really acting like a media channel. I'd imagine pretty soon will be.
Not to interrupt, you've not signed up for this, but we're going to put you on the main stage. If you want to come with us now. I really quickly.
That's what I was trying to get
And
Sorry, what?
do like a wee round up of this in the main room.
Okay.
Cool.
Right.
So that's that.
You're going like that. I thought it was next to be done.